Assalamualaikum and welcome back to Coding with T. Today we are going to learn how to perform email verification in Flutter. First of all, let's quickly have a look what we are going to create. Let's run the application and we are inside our login screen, and when we're going to click on this create account button in here, let me add all the details. Okay, so I've added all the details. Make sure that agree privacy policy is checked. Click on create account and it's processing the information. And you can see we have the account created and also the pop-up for email sent. So you can see the first close button at the top, the cross button, and also you can see email arrived. The first cross button is going to let the user log out from the screen, because currently when the user click on the register button, we first let the user authenticated. Now in here, because user is already authenticated, so using this cross button, we first have to make sure that user is logged out, and then we will redirect that user to the login screen on this cross. And after that, when user again try to log in, he will be redirected back to this screen. And also this continue button is going to manually check that either the user has been authenticated or not. And also using this resend button, we will be able to resend the email again. So first, before verifying the user, let me close this application, rerun this again, and this time we should be redirected to the verify screen, as you can see. And again we have a pop-up which is the new email has been sent, and you can see a new email also has been arrived over here. So we have two emails. So I'm going to click on the first one, click on this link over here, and it is going to verify the user. You can see once user is verified, we have to create a timer which should automatically redirect the user to the next screen. When we are going to open it, you can see the user automatically redirected to the next screen, and we don't have to do anything manually. So let's get started with today's tutorial. Creating Flutter e-commerce application, and we are in the section 4, and in this section we are going to perform the email verification. And in the previous tutorial we learn how to store the data. So these two tutorials are interlinked, not dependent on each other. If you don't want to follow it, the previous tutorial, that's up to you. So today exactly we will be able to learn how to verify the user. So let's head towards overview of this tutorial. So first point, we are going to create email verification controller in which we are going to handle all the activities related to the email verifications. The cross button, resend email, create a timer, automatically send the email. All the things will be in the verification controller. Next, before filling up the controller values, we have to create a function in the authentication repository that will be working to send the email. Every time when we are going to trigger that function, it will send the email to the specific user which we want. And definitely in the previous tutorial I was talking about the exception handling, so this is what we're going to also talk about in today's tutorial. Then in the verification controller, first we have to set the timer, and also we have to make sure that automatically email should be sent. Set the timer, add the manual verification function which will manually verify the email status of that user. And also when application is going to be triggered first time on the app launch, we are going to check in the authentication repository that if user is verified, let the user to the login screen. We're going to basically deals with the user state in the authentication repository. If user email is not verified, we will open the email verification screen. If user is not logged in, we will open the login screen. And also at the end, when user is going to click on that cross button, we will head towards the logout function. So let's get started with today's tutorial. Open Android Studio. Okay, we are inside the sign up controller. So this was the function we created in the previous tutorial. Using this sign up, we first have to check start the loading, then check the internet connection. After that, we are validating the form, checking the privacy policy, and over here I was triggering the authentication repository to register the user in the authentication. So if user is authenticated, we simply pass the UID and create a new user using the user repository inside the Firestore. Stop the loading, show a success message, and over here we were redirecting towards the verify email screen. So let's start it with the verify email screen. This is the design we created in the section 2. You can get the complete code, link is in the description, and also you can watch the previous videos of this playlist or related to one specific section. Already link is given in the description. So in this design, now what we want to do is we want to make sure that whenever this screen opens, the screen should trigger an event which is going to send the email verification. So to do that, first of all, because in the previous tutorial we talked about in detail that why we are going to use separate controllers, separate views. So this is the design. We are not going to do anything over here for the design. So for that, when you go to the features in the authentication authentication feature. And in the controller, in the sign up, I have created a new empty controller which is verify email. So inside this class, again, it extends with the getX controller and it has a simple getter method which has a name instance and it is going to perform the get.find operation. For the email controller, we actually don't need it, but for the best practices, I usually have to write this line over here. So don't worry about this. Okay, next you can see the comments. The first thing, whenever this class will be called, this onInit method will be triggered, and using this onInit method we are going to send the email and also we are going to set the timer so that auto redirect can happen. We will send email verification link over here, add a function which has a timer, and then another function or another method to manually check the email status. So before that, in the authentication repository, over here you can see inside this controller we are going to create the email verification. So it is a simple function, send email verification, because it is going to deal with the cloud query. So we have to make sure that it should be the async function so that we can wait until this operation completed. Then inside the try catch, we are going to use a simple query using the authentication variable we created at the top using Firebase auth.instance. You can directly copy this and instead of this variable, you can paste it Firebase auth.instance dot current user will automatically be fetched, because in the previous tutorial using this method register with email and password, we make sure that we create a user with email and password because we have currently logged in user, not logged in but authenticated user. So that authenticated user will be automatically retrieved using Firebase auth.instance, and that email will be sent using a function which is send email verification. So you just have to call Firebase auth.instance dot current user and send email verification. Make sure that user is already authenticated. Okay, now let's first talk about these exceptions that I previously created over here and I didn't talked about. So the first one is on Firebase auth exception. It is going to catch exceptions related to Firebase authentication. Then we have Firebase exceptions, format exception, and platform exception. And then otherwise, and then we have a default exception that is going to catch anything that will be not cached at the top. So first of all, we are catching Firebase authentication exception. The reason to catch these exceptions separately is to make sure that user can see a relevant message but not a technical message. Let's say we are exposing our application by displaying some technical message, that will be definitely a bad approach, but we also want to make sure that user should know what's happening when he is going to do something wrong that should not be done. So first of all, Firebase auth exception is going to catch the exception and it has some codes. So when you head towards the class which I have created over here in the utility, in the exceptions folder, I have created these 4 to 5 and default exception classes. The first one is a simple class, Firebase auth exception. Just added T to make it custom class. It implements the exception and it has a single variable to receive the code I was talking about, because Firebase auth exception do have a code. When you head toward here, you can see using this E, which is catching the exception. So E.code is going to catch that exception and pass it over here inside this controller. So code will be retrieved over here, and then we have a getter method. So using dot message, we can call this getter method. What it is doing, it is going to receive the code and it has multiple cases. You can get all these cases from the Firebase documentation as well. So I've added some over here. If email in already used, we are going to display the email address is already registered. Please use a different email. So this is a custom message. Then we have invalid email, again a custom message, weak password, user disabled, user not found, wrong password, and list is keep on going. You can again get all this code from the link down below in the description. Okay, same way, when you head towards the Firebase exception, we have the unknown exception, invalid custom token, user disabled, user not found. Some are copied from the Firebase authentication, and some we have keychain error, internal error, and bunch of other options. For the Firebase exception, then we have format exception, and at the bottom we have the platform exception. So you can only create one single exception, add all the cases, and by default at the end when you head towards this, the default error, if not a single case matches, default exception will be thrown, which is an unexpected Firebase error occurred. Please try again. So let's close this, head over here, and by this way we can catch the custom exceptions and no technical message will be delivered to the user. And also rest assured, you can also log everything over here, print exceptions, and you can see we are throwing everything. So to catch it, we have to again create a catch from where we are calling this function. So let's head towards the verify email controller, and in here inside this on init method, we are going to create send email verification. And in here, to create this function, send email verification, we first have to make sure that we are using the try catch and we are going to catch that specific exception that might occur. And using simple tloader class or any pop-up, you can display that specific error. I am using a custom class which is going to display error using get.snackbar. It has a different background color and text color. Warning has a different coloring, and also success has a different coloring. But these all three functions, you can see they are static and they're using snackbar, get.snackbar. So we can send the title, we can send the message, and then inside this try, we are going to make sure that we have to wait until this operation performs. So use the await sign and you make the function async, and then use authentication repository dot instance dot send email verification, and that's it. This is going to send the email verification. And if you can see, whenever this class instance will be created, it is going to send this verification. And if you want to make sure that success message also delivered to the user, you can use the same one over here. Instead of error snack bar, you can display the success snack bar, change the title and message, and that's it. Now we want to trigger this, and how we can trigger it? Simply head towards the verify email screen, and in here, when we are going to call the verify email screen in the build method, we want to call the instance or create the instance of verify email controller. We will use the get.put to create a new instance, because get.put will be called when we want to create instance for the first time, and get.find will be called every time that once the instance is created. So get.find is not going to trigger the on init method. So we're going to use get.put verify email screen, and that's it. Add a constant. And one more thing, we are displaying static email over here. So we want to make sure that whatever email entered by the user should be passed to this screen so that we can display it. I've created a string over here, a nullable string, and call it in the constructor. Just copy this one and replace the manual email. And if this email is null, we can simply display single quotes. And inside the sign up where we are calling this verify screen, we have to call and pass the email that we already received, email.text.trim, to remove this constant. And now whenever we are going to call this, it is going to pass the email over here, and that email will be displayed in the design. And also this verify email screen is going to create the new instance, sorry, not the email screen, verify email controller, and it is going to remove the constant. It is going to open this controller, and that controller is going to trigger the on init method, and it is going to send the email verification, and we will send that using this function. Next, to set the automatic timer, again we want to trigger the timer or activate the timer in the on init method, set timer for auto redirect, and also create a function for the same name, set timer for auto redirect. And for that we have to use timer.periodic method. So timer, when you hover over this, timer is the dart async, and at the top you have to import the dart async to use this timer. So it has two parameters when you hover over this periodic method. First one is duration, and second one is a function which has a timer itself. Close this one. For the duration, this duration means that after how many minutes, seconds you want to recheck or re-execute that specific function. So use the duration, and I'm going to call seconds 1. So after every first second, it should re-trigger the function over here, which is this one. Now inside this function, we have to check using a Firebase authentication. We want to check that if current user is authenticated or not. So for that, again, we are going to use Firebase auth over here, Firebase auth dot instance dot once again use the current user. Current user can be nullable, so add a question mark because we know that user is not null. Dot reload. So after every 1 second, it is going to reload the state of the current user, and we have to make sure that we should make it await and make this timer function to async function. Control Alt L to better see the state. Okay, once we reload the state of the current user after every 1 second, you can increase or decrease the time as you like. I want to now check final user is equal to, again use Firebase auth dot instance dot current user, and inside this user you can see we have if user dot email verified. Again, this user can be null, so we have to add question mark. If email verified, then we want to close the timer and redirect user to success screen, because this email verified can also be null. So using the double question mark means that if email verified is null, we want to return the false. So if user email is verified, only in that case this will be true and it will execute this if statement. So the first thing we want to cancel this timer that we started at the top. So whenever this email verified is false, this timer will keep on running again and again. So once email verified is true, we want to close this timer and we want to redirect to the next screen using get.off method so that this previous email verification screen should be destroyed. So using get.off, we are going to move to new screen which we have already created a success screen. We can pass our own image, title, subtitle, and on press event. Okay, I've added images, title, subtitle, and on press. And for the image, you can see I've passed the animation, which is the JSON animation, or the Lottie animation, which has a JSON files. And in the success screen, the first one is the Lottie image, then we have title, subtitle, and button, and we are passing the on press over here. When you head back to the success screen, you can see we are displaying the image, title, subtitle, and on press event is going to trigger the authentication repository dot instance dot screen redirect. So this screen redirect is going to decide that either user should see the login screen, let the user pass to the home screen, or keep the user on the verify email screen. So you have to perform some changes in the screen redirect so that we can also check the Firebase user as well, because previously in the onboarding we are only checking that when you see this, we are only checking that if user is a first time user, then we are letting the user to the onboarding screen. Otherwise, we will let the user to login screen. So before going that, we have to complete this manually check if email verified. So again, I'm using the same approach, Firebase auth.instance.current user. We don't have to reload this on checking email verification. So just call the current user, get the current user if current user is not null and current user is email verified. We again want to use the success screen using get.off and redirect user to the success screen. So using get.off, call the success screen and pass all these images. Again, we are calling the redirect over here. So before going to authentication screen and set up the redirect, let's call these functions from the design. So head towards the verify email. In here for the first button where we are manually calling the success screen, we are going to remove this and we are going to use the controller instance for the verify email controller and call check email verification status manually. If it will be verified, continue will automatically lead the user to the success screen, and after that user will be able to log in. Then for the second one, which is going to resend the email, and in this we are again going to using fat arrows call controller dot send email verification. This is again going to trigger this function and it is going to send another email to the user. And at the top, you can see we will manually redirect the user to the login screen previously when the cross button will be tapped, cross icon button. So over here, we want to call authentication repository dot instance dot log out the user because we don't have currently logout. So we're going to create it. So first, let's head towards the authentication repository and let me walk you through to the main.dart. In the main.dart, first of all, the first thing that is going to be created is the Firebase initialization. Once the Firebase is initialized, we are going to using then calling our authentication repository. So this authentication repository is a simple class or any class. I'm calling this repository, so don't confuse it with that specific word. Click on this class will be triggered and its override the method onReady will be triggered whenever this class will be executed for the first time. So that will be executed whenever the application launch. So this onReady was previously removing the splash screen and calling the redirect screen redirect method. So this screen redirect method was simply checking that if using the storage, local storage, shared preferences, it was checking that either let the user to the login screen, sorry, the onboarding screen, and if it is not the first time of the user, let the user to the login screen. But now because we have authentication as well, so we have to add one more check that if the Firebase user is authenticated, so we have to need a user type. So you see this user is a type of Firebase auth. It is coming from the Firebase authentication package. So if this user, which can be nullable, if this user is not null, we are going to redirect. This means that user is authenticated. We want to redirect user to see the main dashboard of the application, but we also have to check that if user is authenticated but either user email is verified or not. So for that, we are going to use if user not is equal to null. If user is not null, we want to check again if user dot email verified. If user is verified, using get.offall, remove all the previous screens and head towards the navigation menu. So navigation menu was the bottom navigation menu, which is going to open by default the home screen over here. So if user email is verified, user is not null, we will let the user to see the navigation menu. Else, if user email is not verified inside this if it is not the case, user email is not verified, we have to call the verify email screen, import it, and as an email, because we want to display the user email in the design. For that, you have to call authentication dot current user dot email, because current user can be null, so we have to add a question mark over here. So this email will be passed to the verify email screen. Now we covered two scenarios. If email is verified, head towards the home. If it is not, head towards the email verification. And what if user is null? So we have to call the else over here. If user is null, we have to simply cut everything from here and paste it inside. Using the local storage, we're going to check that if is first time, if it is null, add a true value. If user is a first time user, head towards the onboarding. If it is not the first time, head towards the login screen. If you're not using the local storage check, you just have to call using this get.offall and call the login screen. So if user is not null, only the login screen will be appeared. Now as we are receiving the user over here, so we have to pass the user in this. Let's call authentication dot current user. And same way, when we are calling Firebase authentication instance dot screen redirect on the success screen, so whenever user is going to press the continue button inside this success screen, we have to pass one argument, which is user. So to pass the user to the screen redirect, so instead of creating it over here, let's cut it. And so instead of passing user again and again from all these functions, because we have the user state inside the authentication repository, so let's remove this. We can simply get the user from authentication current user. Whenever this screen redirect will be called, it is going to check everything and redirect user accordingly. Now the next thing inside, you can see verify email. We have to call the logout function. Head towards authentication repository, and over here you can see we have logout user. So create a function, a simple logout function, which will be async again to make sure that until this command executed, it should wait. And using Firebase auth dot instance dot sign out is going to be called to sign out the user from authentication. And using get.offall, we will be redirected back to the login screen. And again, I'm using the all authentications. And over here you can see the error is gone. Now let's run the application. Okay, so I have reinstalled my application, so you can see the onboarding screen. So when we are going to click on this next button, it is going to store the user state in the local storage that user first time appeared, and now next time onwards, do not let the users view the onboarding screen. So let's click on this. We have redirected to the login screen, and in here let's create a new account. So I've added all the details. You can see the password, which is coding with @1. So we are using all the characters that are required. Make sure it's checked. Click on create account. It's processing the information and we should receive the email. You can see we redirected and the second pop-up we received. Let's wait for the email. And you can see email arrived. Listen, before clicking on that verify email link, let's first test the redirect method. So let's close this application. Rerun this app again. After splash screen, we should be seeing the verification screen again. And you can see verify email address received and also automatically email sent. So let's wait for this email. Let's click on it. Click on this link to verify, and you can see email has been verified. Now we should automatically redirect to the next screen. So let's click on this, and you can see automatic redirect also working. And when you're going to click on this continue, we should be redirected back to the home screen. The reason by redirecting to home screen is that when we are going to click on this, you can see in the verify email controller, we have to check that we redirected to this success screen. And when this on press will be triggered, it is going to call the screen redirect method. And in the screen redirect, if user is not null, which is not null, and user is also verified, we want to redirect user to the home screen. So let's click on this continue. And you can see we have the home screen right in front of us. Now, every time when we are going to close this and rerun it again, because user is verified, this time we should see the home screen, and you can see the home screen is right there. So that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you learned something new. If you learned something new, please like the video, and you can also download the complete code. Link is in the description. If you have any question, you can ask me down below in the comments. And once again, thank you for watching. Take care. Allah Hafiz.